In your speech yesterday, you said that Earth's future hangs in the balance and that without more action, future generations will be left to struggle for survival. That's some of the strongest language I've heard you use. Is there a danger that it's more frightening for people than galvanizing?
No, because most of what I talked about yesterday was really the optimism, the opportunity we have to be able to make a difference. But people need to understand, and I say this in the gentlest way. I mean, I'm not trying to scare people, but if we don't understand the reality of what we're dealing with and the nature of the challenge of nature itself being out of control because we've changed it, because human beings are putting pollution into the air, which is warming the planet, and that steadily is going to have more and more impact. This year will not be, frankly, as bad as next year at the rate we're going, but we can turn that. And that's the message I really wanted to share with people, is this is a job creator, this transition. Moving to a clean energy economy is not unlike moving through the Industrial Revolution. It's a new stage of human development on the planet. It's a new stage of economic development on the planet. And every sector of our economy can benefit from this transition. Instead of making a steam engine as they did 100 years ago, you make a wind turbine that produces a massive amount of power now. They're getting more and more powerful. It takes fewer and fewer to provide energy. So to me, that's exciting. And I see jobs. I see economic development. I see a better future, healthier, cleaner, less air pollution, less cancer, less people dying from the lack of quality air. And right now, we lose about 8 million people a year to the bad air quality of the planet.
Also, as you outlined, a moment of opportunity, but great peril too.
Well, the peril is because of what we have unleashed that we can't control. Mother Nature is sending us a warning signal every 18 days or something. I mean, we have $1 billion climate events happening around the planet, something like once a month or so or more. That's extraordinary. And so, again, our security, and we spend a lot of money for our military. We spend a lot of money on police, on borders, on different things. Our security as human beings working in our societies is very much at risk because of the climate crisis. Why? Because food production is at risk. The extreme heat is very difficult for people to work in some parts, very difficult to live in some parts of the world. We see water scarcity, and that will increase as the problems continue. Over the century, scientists are predicting the melting of the glaciers. And the rate of melting that's taking place in the Arctic and Antarctic is going to have a profound impact on sea level rise, which already is threatening nation states, island states, vulnerable countries that are low-lying like Bangladesh and others. So look, all we have to do, and the point I was trying to make, and I was so pleased to be able to be in Edinburgh because the Enlightenment took place there and people decided that it was important to take empirical evidence, what you see, what you feel, what you can analyze, and translate that into different human behavior. That's the challenge of the climate crisis now. We can't just continue to have carbon burning, the burning of fossil fuel without capturing the emissions. That is our challenge. And so someone's going to make a lot of money from devising the way that's economical to be able to capture those emissions.
So we have had an extraordinary year, haven't we? The recent appalling fires in Hawaii, in Greece and in Spain. There's been biblical flooding in India to California, record-breaking heat all over the planet. And yet emissions are still going in the wrong direction, particularly when it comes to the burning of coal. What is it going to take, do you think, for the rate of progress to start happening correctly?
Well, first of all, it takes leadership. I mean, people are going to have to stay on the track of the things that they have promised to do, and that is true for governments, and it's also true for corporations. We need to make sure that the promises being made in the Glasgow, meeting or in the Sharm el-Sheikh meeting, and this year when we go to Dubai, We must raise our ambition, and we have to stay at it, all of us. The folks with money, the folks with the big economies need, because they are the biggest emitters of these emissions, they have to step up and really stay engaged in reducing those emissions. And if the big economies don't set the example, it's really hard to ask the small folks to step up. And by the way, they're not producing a lot of emissions. About 20 countries, the largest economies of the world, equal almost 80% of all of the emissions. So we, US, China, India, Russia, Indonesia, Brazil, UK, Italy, France, Germany, the biggest economies of the world, really have to lead the way here. And it's exciting what is happening. I mean, one of the things that gives me optimism and hope is the fact that the electric vehicle revolution is happening at a faster pace than people anticipated. So, as a result, the modeling that shows us where we're going is being altered by the lesser demand. And that means we could reach a peak of fossil fuel demand much earlier than we had thought and begin to move away from our dependency on propulsion and heating and power, all of which come from dirty fuel today, because we're not capturing the emissions.
The world, though, is still way off track in terms of getting to the right place at the right time. Do you see any real fundamental progress? I mean, the last time we spoke, you said all countries were off track when it came to meeting their net zero targets. Has anything changed?
Yes, countries are now moving more effectively. In the United States, for instance, President Biden succeeded in passing the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act. That has had a profound impact in our country. We are seeing a massive growth in new battery companies, production. We're seeing an amazing amount of effort now going into carbon capture. It wasn't that serious before. It is serious now. We're seeing a huge amount of transition in buildings, in the codes for the building of buildings, which haven't been built in a way that reduces emissions. I mean, there is really momentum. And now we're beginning to see people stepping up and making commitments. Many corporations are doing their initial reductions of emissions. They've made commitments to be on the pathway of keeping 1.5 degrees centigrade as the limit of the warming. And I'm genuinely encouraged that now I see momentum building. Is it where it needs to be? No. Are we doing it fast enough yet? No. But there's signs that we can kick into higher gear and actually make things happen. So the key is, don't go backwards. We can't have people, sort of kind of minimizing the commitments that they have made. And that goes for everybody around the world.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because that's exactly what's happened in the UK. I mean, the Climate Change Committee has just said that this country has lost its clear global leadership on climate change, backtracking on fossil fuel commitments, consenting a new coal mine, supporting new oil and gas in the North Sea. It's a real problem that the UK is heading in that direction, isn't it?
Well, it depends what the direction really is. My understanding from UK officials is that they are promising to stay on the track and on the target of their reductions. There will be drilling. We are drilling too. Others are, because there's a certain demand that is built into our economies right now.
Is new extraction necessary, though?
When you say new extraction, do you have to continue to pump? Yes, you do. Do you need to explore and go out and lease new leaseholds? I doubt it if you're doing the other things that you need to do, and that could be done. The International Energy Agency tells us again and again that we have the technology necessary to meet our 2030 goals. We're just not deploying all of it because people are more comfortable and more relaxed and business as usual with the current production levels of oil and gas. That has to change. We do have to begin to restrain and transition faster, but you can't just shut down an economy overnight. You don't want to do that. You don't want to ever shut down the economy. You want to transition your economy in order to be able to keep new jobs coming online that pay well, that provide people the ability to be able to live according to their hopes and ambitions, but at the same time not doing the damage we're doing today. That's possible now. But I see a faster rate of people adopting those alternatives. And I see in many countries, I've listed many of them in my speech yesterday. I mean, Poland, for instance, instead of building a new coal-fired power plant, they're selling a lot of people heat pumps. And those heat pumps are being deployed and they're working and keep people warm and they're far less expensive. And they do the job of reducing emissions. We're seeing in many countries around the world new policies being adopted, and coal-fired power is beginning to be diminished in some places, not enough in big places that count. China, for instance, has brought many too many new coal-fired power plants online. We really have to move away from unabated burning of fossil fuel. That's the real cause of this problem, and if we focus on that, we could win this battle.
One of the issues here, as it is in other Western countries, particularly in Europe, is this government's very squeamish about imposing costs on people in the green transition. For example, putting heat pumps in the home, scrapping gas boilers, same issue in Germany, having to buy new electric vehicles. And so they appear to be cooling on the idea of really accelerating the green transition in the UK. Certainly that's the accusation. Isn't that, as the cost of living crisis bites, a real concern for you as you look at the landscape here?
No pun intended in the cooling on that, I know. The key here is that we stay on a track to reduce the emissions. And economies will adjust. We're not requiring people to take on a higher cost. In fact, we believe the costs will be lower. For instance, solar. The cost of solar has gone down 83% in the last years. It is now far cheaper to have solar than it is to have a coal-fired power plant or build a new nuclear plant or something. It's much cheaper. It's also cheaper for wind. Wind has gone down 50%. And there's been a massive increase in our capacity to be able to produce power from alternative and renewable energy. In the United States, 90%, in fact 90% globally, of the new power being created is coming from renewable energy. So the transition is taking place. We have to move it faster, and we have to resist the pressure that is coming from some interests who want to continue business as usual. We do not have the time or space for business as usual.
Let's talk about the US then. In the recent US Republican debate.
Is that what it was? I read some accounts of it. It sounded quite different, but anyway.
It was certainly interesting to watch. And only one of the candidates said explicitly that they believed climate change was real and driven by human behavior. Another even used the word hoax. Now, of course, none of these people are president, but one of them could be, depending on the outcome of the next election. Doesn't that kind of public display really undermine America's standing in the world?
Well, I'm not going to get into the presidential politics at all. But unfortunately, we have people around the world who are proselytizing lies and distortions and non-scientific information. The disinformation is a problem for us. It creates confusion in people. Some people just resist this either on the basis of ideology or on this disinformation. And it's really costly, it's very dangerous, and it's wrong. And I said yesterday in my speech in Edinburgh that, you know, those folks who are consciously doing this as a matter of just politics, and it's very hard to see how people cannot accept that the climate crisis is here and happening. All the scientists of the world are really now, the peer-reviewed studies, the legitimate scientific reports, they tell us unequivocally, it is here, it is happening now. Yesterday was the example of an Iraqi family where they're dismantling their home brick by brick and door by door frame and windows and putting them in the back of a truck and driving off. That's it, their home is gone because they can't live there anymore. And they can't live there anymore because it's getting hotter and hotter and hotter by the day. Records broken, 52 degrees centigrade in China this past months. Record-breaking over 100 degrees Fahrenheit in Arizona for 30 days. Never happened anything like that. People are changing their patterns of life, becoming nocturnal, getting up in the evening and avoiding the day because it's too hot. I mean, if you can't read the tea leaves from what Mother Nature is telling us, 30 million people in Pakistan in an unprecedented flood, and things that used to happen once every 500 years or 1,000 years are happening now with regularity. So the folks who stand up and say this is, not happening or something, they're just not living on the same planet. And they're not listening to the facts, and they're not simply fully briefed and informed, or they're just playing politics with it. Either way, it's dangerous, and it will cost us far more money. Every economic analysis says this clean energy transition is going to cost more if you wait. And the longer you wait, the more damage will be done, and the harder it will be to be able to get this done. Now, the fact is that the science says that we can do this in the years that we have ahead of us. The marketplace has made this decision. I mean, you have some politicians standing up and saying something, oh, it's a hoax, or we can't do it, or whatever, or we shouldn't do it. But guess what? The smartest people in the world running some of the largest corporations in the world, they're doing it. The oil companies themselves and gas companies will tell you climate crisis is here and it's happening. And these CEOs are tuning their corporations into the future. At Ford Motor Company, General Motors, Mercedes, BMW, all these companies have retooled their plants to make electric vehicles. And they will no longer make internal combustion engine vehicles by 2035, by 2030. So this transition is happening. And I don't believe any politician can, obviously they shouldn't, but I don't believe they can turn this around or stop it. Why? Because the power of the marketplace, which is decided by human beings everywhere, the demand will be for cleaner air, cleaner water, a safer community, a community that can function and not make people sick and kill them. We lose 8 million people a year to the bad quality of air. That's greenhouse gas pollution. And everybody knows there is such a thing as black lung disease and particulate disease. So I'm adamant about this, that we can win this battle. The question is, will we? We will have a low-carbon, no-carbon economy somewhere in the next years. The question is, will we have it in time to heed the warnings of the best scientists who tell us if we don't do this adequately by 2030 and then by 2050, we will not succeed in winning the battle.
Talking about oil companies, the president of COP28 is, as you know, the CEO of the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company. Some have likened this to putting a tobacco executive in charge of an anti-smoking treaty. Doesn't his position as a fossil fuel billionaire fundamentally undermine the COP28 summit and all the negotiations taking place within it?
It depends entirely on what he proposes, what they're prepared to do, and what happens.
Do you have faith he can do it?
I believe he's fighting to do it. There's no question in my mind that he is fighting to get this done right now. He has set out some very strict requirements that he believes that the oil and gas, that the fossil fuel industry needs to follow. The Abu Dhabi company has pledged that they are going to reduce their emissions. They're going to capture the emissions, but they're also not going to make them in the first place. They're moving towards renewables. They have the largest investment in the world. That's not my job to sit here and define, what they're doing, but I can tell you that the test will be in what is on the table to be negotiated and what they're fighting for. And right now, they're fighting for the right things. They're fighting for methane reduction. They're fighting for these companies to capture their emissions. They're fighting for a very different energy future. And they have already had a record of building a modern, new energy, clean energy city. They're investing huge amounts of money in renewable energy around the world, helping India to deploy its solar and its wind, other countries also. So look, I'm not their spokesperson, and I don't, you know, I'm going to hold everybody to the same standard of performance and of delivery. And the UAE has committed they're going to deliver this. They're going to have, they believe, a very changed approach to the fossil fuel industry, which will be positive in the sense that it's going to demand the reduction of these emissions and a clear pathway to net zero by 2050, with those companies signing up to the Paris Agreement, which they haven't all done yet. So let's wait and see what, you know, the proof will be in the pudding. We'll see what happens as we go forward. And I'm going to push every inch of the way for exactly what I would push for, whether it wasn't that company. They have to be held to the same standard as everybody else in the world right now. This is a shared crisis. We all have to do our part, and that particularly includes the COP presidency.
And finally, Bill Gates is among those who have said that limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees is out of reach. And perhaps he's publicly voicing a privately held fear that I've certainly heard from a number of scientists and policymakers. Do you believe that 1.5 is still a realistic or even helpful goal for the international community?
I'm convinced it's a helpful goal, because I think the more you reach for the bigger goal, the closer you're going to get to being able to keep it. And every tenth of a degree that you go beyond that is extremely costly, extremely damaging, and perhaps even, you know, fully catastrophic. Because as we progress to become warmer, we reach what are called tipping points, where we go over a barrier that you can't go back. It's irreversible. That is true now of at least 5 potential sectors where the coral reefs may be gone. I don't know if we could bring them back. Scientists aren't convinced of that. The permafrost is thawing. How are you going to make it cold enough suddenly to be able to hold on to it? You may be beyond the way to save it. Arctic, Antarctic are particularly focused on as a tipping point potential. So the key here is we have to strive. Now, I know it's hard. We are not on track today to keep 1.5 alive. We're not even on track to keep 2 degrees alive today. And that's why we need to be pushing harder. But our mantra is not, you know, automatically, because we want to keep the prospect of being able to do it alive. That's what we're fighting for now. And I think we can keep it alive, as the IEA has told us. If all the promises of Glasgow are fulfilled, we would be holding the Earth's temperature increase to 1.8 degrees. Before we got going at this, that would have been 3 degrees or 3.7. We've made enormous, at least, movement in terms of the commitments, but the commitments have to be fulfilled. After Sharm el-Sheikh, which followed Glasgow, we learned from the IEA that with the additional ambition, we could hold it to 1.7 degrees. So it's within the realm of possibility, if we were to really suddenly get more serious, pull more people to the table, do the things that we know we need to do. This is really a test of global leadership, of humanity, really, and our willingness to do what science tells us. And this is why the speech I gave in Edinburgh, I thought, was sort of important, in the sense that that's the place where a lot of the Enlightenment took place, where people decided 300 years ago that they were going to listen to science. They were going to really focus on the you know, on why things happen and how they happen, and put that scientific knowledge to use. We're not doing that fully today. We know what the scientists are saying. They are unanimous, fundamentally. I mean, near unanimous, 95%, 98%. And there are no real peer-reviewed studies to the contrary saying it's not happening. So let's be smart, do what they fought to do 300 years ago, keep our capacity to reason as human beings, centering us and focusing us on the choices that we have. And we need to make those choices. We need to make them now, because time is running out. But we can do it. And it's really up to us. This is a test of, you know, our capacity to do what no other species on the planet can do, and that's think. So let's take our thinking. I said yesterday, let's bring the wisdom to the table that we can summon.
Special Envoy John Kerry, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.